Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 5th Annual Vibrant Living Expo and Culinary Showcase. I'm Sherry Soria, and I'm here to welcome you and to introduce a very dear friend of mine and colleague, Dr. Brian Clement. Dr. Brian Clement is an internationally known expert in the progressive health movement. As director of the renowned Hippocrates Health Institute, he and his team have developed a state-of-the-art program for health maintenance, active aging, disease prevention, and recovery at his Florida center. In addition to daily counseling and research studies, Dr. Clement conducts conferences worldwide on attaining health and creating longevity. And today he's going to share some of that with you. Unfortunately, his wife, Anna Maria Clement, is not going to be here. She was slated to be in this room after his talk, but fortunately, he is here, and he's going to extend his talk and cover her information as well as his own. So you're here for probably an hour and 45 minutes or so, if not more. And then after that, you want to get your butts over to the Culinary Center where we have our pie auction going on at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you there. And please help me welcome Dr. Brian Clement.
I just had the privilege to write about Sherry and her incredible organization. She hasn't read this or heard this yet. And I said, which I feel from the bottom of my heart, that Sherry has been the most important influence in the field of living and raw food nutrition on the planet. That often as I travel the globe, visiting with former students of hers that are now spreading the message through their restaurants and centers worldwide. So I want to honor you in everything you do. Today they've asked me to speak about basic science. One of the problems with the field of nutrition is that it has dramatically and grossly lacked basic fundamentals. And this has been putting us in a very vulnerable position in the mainstream, who spend all of their time on fraudulent studies to produce products, and so it precludes anyone who doesn't join the Big Boys Club. And the Big Boys Club is really, what is the science behind what you're talking about? Well, I'll give you a little background on Hippocrates and myself. As a very young man, I found myself obese before it was popular to be obese. They didn't even know what to call me then. Because I was a boy, they called me big. If I was a girl, they would have called me an FAT word, unfortunately. And at a very young age came to a recognition that I may get sick and die, and so I better change, and had great fortune to meet my first mentors who directed me in the direction of being a vegan. Now that was quite difficult because I liked meat, and I even liked dairy food more than meat. But I did it because they were quite influential and quite influential from history. My first mentor had 40 years earlier been told she was going to die of cancer, got on a vegan diet, and healed it. I was then in school. She kept saying to me, "You've got to work in this field. You've got to work in this field." I said, "Well, what's the field?" And she said the 3 golden words for a boy from the 60s. "You're not going to make money." That was good, because money was bad. "You're going to help people." That was good. "And you're going to work long and hard hours." So I began to work, and when I went out to lecture almost 40 years ago for the first time, 10 people showed up, I would cry with joy. And they were almost 100% desperately ill people who were told they were going to die too. What's really pleasant to see now as I travel the globe is that there's an ever-increasing consciousness occurring. The new paradigm, where people literally are taking responsibility, realizing pretty much that every system we've been taught to believe in is bad and flawed. Think about those systems. Can you imagine we have a healthcare system in Western Europe and North America that in most cases make you sicker than healthier? That's pretty scary when you think about it. You have educational systems that don't teach us to think. It's pretty scary. It really is very scary. My wife is from Sweden. 75% of Americans say, "Well, I like your country. I've been to the Alps." when Europeans, well, they would tell you they've been to Stockholm. That's right. And so what they would literally be doing in Europe when they walk out of what they call gymnasium or high school is most speak several languages, as my wife did, 7 languages fairly fluently when she was an 18-year-old young lady walking out. But if we dumb down the public, we can get away with a lot of different things. And boy, have they been getting away with things. Actually, selling you products that at the end of the lead, they tell you are going to make you sick and potentially kill you. But in spite of that, because we've all been lulled into a state of unconsciousness, we go out and buy them anyway. With numbers and statistics in healthcare today, any thinking person should back away from it rapidly and well. Now, that doesn't mean that all modern medicine is bad. Let's give it credit where it deserves credit. Diagnostically, it's brilliant. And every year we seem to get better at that. My work is significantly easier because now we have detailed information on what disorder the person has and if it metastasized or not, or if there's other areas of interest within the human body, from brilliant things like PET scans and high-speed CAT scans, etc. Problem is, once the mainstream practitioner discovers what you have, please, in most cases, don't let them treat you. Now, that's pretty scary. I went on not too many years ago, got my PhD in nutritional science, had to bear it because pretty much most of what I was being taught was wrong. They very much focus on the paradigm of what they can sell. And what they can sell and have been very successful with is proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Now they're throwing a little fatty acids in there. Not a big moneymaker for them, so they don't speak much about that. My newest book that will come out in October is exposing the entire supplement industry. It's called Supplements Exposed. It is a scientifically validated book that literally shows you the picture in many cases and the date when a supplement was discovered and the year they then prostituted that supplement and made it in a laboratory into a chemical. With on the side of the bottle it's saying natural. Well, first time I heard the word natural, it was the early 1960s. I was on a date. And back then, all the girls wore Noxzema. How many of the older women here know what I mean? Every once in a while, I breeze by somebody wearing Noxzema, and I become sentimental. And I never forget saying to this girl I really liked, I said to her, listen, boy, you really smell good. And she said to me something which was unique in the early 60s. She said, well, what I'm wearing is natural. Now, we didn't talk much about natural then. There was nature. You went into nature, but natural, what was natural? And was it natural? Yes, Noxzema is made out of petrochemicals, oil. Same type of oil that you put on your brakes and in your tank. So this is how they get by with it. How many of you know that 85% of supplements made today are made by the pharmaceutical industry? 85% are made. And in this Revelation book that I hope really has relevant tracking out there, I'm going to actually show you how it devastates the human body to take these so-called natural supplements because it disturbs, weakens the immune system, giving you greater and larger opportunity to be sicker or to actually attract diseases if you're not sick to begin with. There are incredibly good supplements. 2 years ago in our magazine, and I hope you get that magazine. If you don't, sign up and you'll be getting it. In the future, you should be getting it, yeah. I did a whole feature on supplementation and told you, in spite of the fact that most supplements, 92%, are dangerous for you to take, that supplements are really needed today by the average person. Now, this doesn't come from an opinion I have. It comes from 40 years of clinical research on human beings. About 3 months ago, I sat and figured out that I've worked with over 150,000 people in my 40-year career. 4 of those years were in Europe and the rest here in the United States. As director of Hippocrates Health Institute, I brought the science in there in 1980 when I became the director. And we do relevant and consistent blood profiles on people when they arrive, when they leave, and for the rest of their life for free, we counsel them. So no matter where they are in the world, they're sending blood tests and scans back, and that helps us to help them stay on track. But most important, what it does is after they and we are gone, it leaves a legacy of solid clinical research on humans for the next generation. We're right now in the middle of an NIH study, where next year we hope to present what is called the best case studies. We're taking several people who were told they were going to die, all under 6 months with stage 4 cancers, and going to present how now, years later, they are not sick. And by the way, here's all the clinical research on them of how they've recovered. We also are in the middle of a study with Washington University. Some of you may know, at least those of you that are literate in science would know Dr. Fontana, who works at Washington University, one of our great institutions of medicine in St. Louis. And the study we're doing with him is to show that the average drop in cholesterol during the 3-week program at Hippocrates is 50 points. Now, I get a laugh going when I see oatmeal reducing after 2 months 2%. And that's because they gave up the Canadian bacon that morning, not because the oatmeal got rid of the cholesterol. So we are all on our way to a new world where pretty much everyone's sick. It's no longer them and us. It's all of us in this very same boat, same bad situation, getting sicker with no answer, and we have some of the answers. And we have had thousands and thousands and thousands of people heal catastrophic disease. But what's really refreshing, over the last 12 to 15 years, there's an ever-increasing larger group of people that come to us to prevent illness, to prevent premature aging. And this is a nice group to work with. And it's wonderful to see people realizing that it's really up to you. Our mission statement at Hippocrates that the staff came together and just once again renewed less than a year ago is helping people help themselves. And that's really got to be the mantra for modern healthcare. Not, we are going to heal you, pay us. That's the present mantra. Give us money, we'll heal you, keep coming back because we'll never make sure that you're completely well. The real mantra should be helping you to help yourself. And that's how people do get well, stay well, taking total, absolute, utter responsibility, focusing just like a laser beam, and making sure they do everything in their power to get well. So let's go through some of the basic science, but before we do that, we'll take a small trip to Hippocrates. And this was on national television there about a year and a half ago.
Imagine the year is 2020. You have a routine doctor's visit. You weigh in, get a body scan to check your heart rate, blood pressure, bone density, and before leaving, you get your regular anti-aging shot. Though the idea may not seem that far-fetched, scientists admit the road toward a longevity vaccine is a long one. In the meantime, there are ways to live longer, healthier lives with active aging.
Well, active aging begins in the human mind. We must be positive and have a great outlook and have an ambition to have a full and happy life, no matter what age we are. Number 2, it has to be a diet that is rich in raw, organic living foods, and they have to be vegan, no animal foods. 3rd is exercise, both aerobic exercise and resistant exercise, to keep bone and muscle strength strong.
The fastest growing segment in healthcare today is so-called anti-aging medicine. In an attempt to stop the clock, baby boomers are turning to a variety of options from the subtle to the extreme to improve their appearance. And greed often outweighs the need for gentle, compassionate, and pure techniques.
Body, mind, and spirit are not independent. They work together. The body affects the mind, and the mind affects the body. Every day I see this diagnostically in action. When a person unifies these elements, they appear younger, vital, and certainly more healthy.
Modern research has now established direct links between certain foods and health risks, while authorities in both public and private sectors universally confirm the severe decline of health in Western civilization. The Life Change program, developed by Hippocrates Health Institute, located in West Palm Beach, Florida, was created some decades ago in response to this need, and its mission continues to be educating people about disease prevention and the effects of positive diet and lifestyle choices in order to pursue active aging.
The program actually avails to people who use it body, mind, and spirit health. We give them modern technologies
that are cutting edge, at the same time practical information, knowing how to bring this into their own personal life and their family's life. They become representatives of what humans are capable of.
My background is a professional dancer, and I slowly merged into becoming a professional fitness instructor for well over 31 years now. And during that point in time, I slowly started developing fibromyalgia and digestive disorders. I started coming here about 2.5 years ago every day for lunch, and also involving myself in some of their therapies. And my health has accelerated. I couldn't even put a number on it in every aspect, body, mind, and spirit.
One of the great tragedies of the civilized world, according to Doctors Brian and Anne-Marie Clement, is the acceptance of current dietary standards. The Clements teach a living foods diet, rich in vitamins, minerals, and proteins. The vegetarian plan is believed to supply the oxygen, enzymes, alkalinity, and bioelectrical charges vital to cellular and general health.
When I see the cells of thousands of people a year, the living food diet and exercise program always increase the oxygen and nutrition level.
In 2004, I was diagnosed with a large brain tumor. And with Brian's guidance, he put me on a living and raw food diet with magnet therapy and other therapy and supplements, because my brain tumor was so large that he knew that it could not dissolve itself. I needed the surgery. I had the surgery in 2004.
Physicians at the National Institutes of Health believed that the surgery would only bring temporary relief and that the cancer would likely return. Following surgery, Bonnie fell back into her old habits and went off the Hippocrates program. And as the physicians predicted, 2 new tumors were discovered.
And I went to Brian and he goes, "Look, Bonnie," he goes, "you have to stay on this diet. Do living and raw food diet for the rest of your life." And I did that, the supplements, and other alternative health. And what took place was I started feeling great again. I started feeling alive. And every time I go up to the NIH, National Institute of Health, my MRI is clear. It's unbelievable because nobody can believe it.
I've been 100% raw and eating live and living food for about 5 years now. And can't say enough about it.
The vegan diet has not only been researched here at Hippocrates for very many decades, but worldwide the most renowned research scientists in biology tell you that this is the only way people should be eating. The China study, which was the most significant report on human diet ever, written by Dr. Colin Campbell, Cornell University, stated it so well, that every man, woman, and child on earth should be a vegan vegetarian. Why? We live the longest, we are the healthiest, with the least disease. Additionally, here at Hippocrates, we use wheatgrass, which is the most popular health food for the last 20 years. Wheatgrass is inoculating your body with blood of the plant, which, by the way, increases the strength of your blood, which makes you a healthier person on all levels.
My mom, she had done some additional research online and came across Hippocrates. She actually came here and came home, told us all about it, told about how advanced they were in terms of the medical perspective, not just raw food, but also the science behind it. And so we had to come out and check it out for ourselves.
I also did the 9-week program, the Health Educator program, and that really equipped me to minister to people and help guide them with the same health principles, and just counsel, and really taught me the relationship and working with people and how to help them along this process.
Hippocrates has assembled the world's first complementary active aging team, consisting of specialists dealing with the brain, appearance, oral health, internal biochemical support, cosmetic and therapeutic vein procedures, and even cancer prevention. The team enables Hippocrates to comprehensively address needs, providing for healthful aging.
As a emergency room physician, I see major changes that can occur if they follow the Hippocrates lifestyle change. One being sugar intake. Number 1 cause of diabetes and heart attacks and high blood pressure is from diet. And so if you limit your sugar intake and your salt intake, this can be all prevented. Coronary artery disease starts because of sugar and salt and carbohydrates. So with Hippocrates lifestyle change, you don't have any of this.
I'm a board certified internist. I traditionally trained. I went to Boston University School of Medicine and MIT undergraduate. I have a specialty in varicose vein disease and treatment evaluation. And for me, it's very important to incorporate Hippocrates into my treatment of patients because much of varicose vein disease is dictated by lifestyle and also by nutrition. And of course, you know that the nutrients that help varicose veins are all live nutrients. And so when my patients have problems, and I tell them that they need to be on raw fruits and vegetables, they may look at me a little askance. But then when they come to Hippocrates and understand the reasoning for it, they're more likely to do it. Also, a lot of patients who have varicose vein disease don't have it in a vacuum. They have other chronic diseases. And again, it's like killing two birds with one stone because they improve their health by following a healthy, live, raw food lifestyle, which not only helps their chronic diseases, but also helps their varicose vein disease.
Brian came to me quite some time ago because what he is about detoxification and healing on a very pure level. And he realized a long time ago that the oral cavity was indeed connected to the rest of the body. And for so long, so many medical and dental people tried to say that that was not true. But he realized that there's a lot of oxidative stress, there's a lot of connective tissue breakdown, there's a lot of chronic inflammation in the oral cavity that affects the rest of the body. He wanted me to come on board because I'm a mercury-free dentist, and as a mercury-free dentist, we have a safe protocol to effectively remove the mercury if the patient so desires to have that done.
We were elated at the turn of the 21st century when we received the honor as the #1 medical and health spa on the planet. When I asked and inquired why they gave it to us, they had waited for decades to give us that distinguished placement. This institute has had more people recover from catastrophic disease and fight the premature aging process than any other organization, institute, or healthcare system on the planet Earth.
Physicians and experts are finding growing evidence that living raw food is the sole most important ingredient in reducing and limiting untimely aging. For more
Hope you enjoy that.
on the programs available.
Okay, now we're going to go on to some basic science here too. Uh-oh, something just happened there. We're going on. Now, up here you see living nutrition. What does that mean? We'll read just below that. Food containing high-frequency nutrients. Now, what has been grossly lacking within the mainstream nutritional field is they don't consider the biofrequency or the ionic frequency. Ionic is a very simple word, meaning electrically charged frequency of nutrients. When we've been looking through tens of thousands of microscopic uptakes of nutrients, what we find is that there's an electromagnetic dance that occurs between the human cell when it's strong and well enough, the electromagnetic frequency or biofrequency of the cell, and a living nutrient. We've been doing now for several years a legitimate nutritional study test called SpectraCell test. And what we're finding within just a matter of 1 week of putting people on the Hippocrates diet, they're now uptaking nutrients that in many cases we have history they've been lacking for 10 and 20 years. The difference is when you're taking non-charged or non-frequency nutrients, even though they mimic and appear to be like nutrients within food, they are not because they don't have the ability to electrically be uptaken into the red blood cell. And who is a red blood cell? You. When I look out there in the audience, you're a gathering of red blood cells. Your skin, the largest organ of your body. Now you have other cells, but that's the one that holds organs and bones, all of that together. Now, we've learned about hope, and this is a new one, not the hope that our president's giving us, but a hormone hope and an oxygen hope and a phytonutrient hope and an enzyme hope. But we're going to come back to that in a minute. First, we're going to talk about the things that are a little bit more mundane, but show you they have a place and an important place. Modern science limitation versus Hippocrates' clinical research and history. Proteins, vitamins, minerals, and trace minerals are certainly not the whole picture. First, we're going to get to proteins. Now, we're going to equate this to a tent. Even if you've never erected a tent, you know what it takes to put one up. And the very first thing you have to put up is the pole. In my day, it was a wooden stick, 2 of them, that you had to stick in the middle. Now you have these elongated, stretchy nylon things. But you need that because without that, you can't go one step further. The proteins acts as a framework of the cell like the poles in a tent. Hippocrates has created the most complete protein diet, augmented by crucial mineral balance, which is another thing that is not talked about in the mainstream literature in science today, which is lacking in foods grown in all of this deficient soil. As a matter of fact, an organic food, we should aspire to have it at 25% organic soil. You know what the average organic soil? 2 to 3% that we grow our food in. So the whole food type of organic foods you buy, no wonder they go bad in 2 and 3 days. They don't have any life in it. And Ann Wigmore, our founder, was so remarkable because she didn't have an intellect. She had total instinct. It was wonderful to be with her. And what she said to me one day is, don't you understand? If the soil is rich, the plant is rich, and your body is rich and strong at that point. And she actually wrote a book. It probably sold 10 copies, called Organic Soil, The Perfect Diet. It was just way ahead of its time. People didn't understand what she was talking about then. Proteins that are complete, that means they're giving you, affording you the 9 essential amino acids, proteins that your body does not produce. Foods containing all the essential amino acids are found readily and abundantly in these highly digestible, nutritious, and most important, easy to prepare and digestible foods. Things like sunflower seeds and their sprouts. All the way back in 1975, here in California, UCLA called sunflower sprouts the most complete balanced form of protein grown on soil. We've now learned many years since about the essential fats that are in sunflower. Every single day when you're on the Hippocrates diet, you're drinking green drinks, at least 2. And a good part of that green drink is made out of sprout juice. Now, the sprouts from things like sunflower and pea greens are literally, listen closely, literally 30 times more nutritious than the best organic vegetable that you pick, wash, and eat. So the organic vegetable in your backyard grown in 25% organic soil is 30 times less nutritious than a sprout like a sunflower, a wheatgrass, also, what else? Pea greens. Now, pea greens, we should not say this in the United States. When I'm in Europe, I can speak about this. In Northern Europe, when they treat cancer in mainstream hospitals, they actually use protease, protein-digesting enzymes, systemic enzymes, to help to break down cancers. It also helps to break down viruses and bacteria. And pea greens are shockingly high in protease. So that's in every one of our green drinks, too. Sesame seeds. Remember the old saying, open sesame? Why they made sesame so central in their diet in the Middle East, where modern Western civilization was born out of. Believe it or not, in Iran and Iraq. That was where modern civilization was born. Look what we do with craziness, huh? Basically, they knew sesame had saved their life. It's a complete protein. And when you sprout it, it's digestible. When you don't sprout it, just like most nuts and seeds, most sprout juices are complete proteins. Mung beans in their sprouts. Hey, mung beans, you know them as Chinese bean sprouts, have more protein than a soybean, and out of all foods ever analyzed, are the most digestible. You can put a mung bean or a Chinese bean sprout in your mouth, it melts practically. No wonder the Asians have this riddled in all their food. Hemp seeds, now that's a funny one. When I was young and I used to buy grass, I used to be angry at the seeds. I used to be throwing the seeds out the window. Now it's funny, I'd be throwing the grass out the window and eating the seeds. How life changes, isn't it? And wheatgrass juice, as we said in the film, as tough as wheatgrass juice is to taste, it has remained for now 22 years the most popular health food worldwide. And why? Quite simply, because of the effect it has. How many of you drink wheatgrass regularly here? I mean, my God, we go a day without it and we feel like, oh my Rome, what happened here? Now we go to the protein myth. Meat and dairy. Cooking destroys amino acids that are essential for our body and brain function. So what we do in the mainstream is we think, as I was taught, that meat is a great source of protein. First, we no longer slaughter meat, which was a cruel and insane thing to do to begin with. We have ranchers somewhere east of you here, slaughter them, freeze it, send it to you, you cook it, and then eat it. Now, if you think that that's complete, you've got to be out of your mind on that one. The truth of the matter is that you should never cook anything. You should never, ever touch meat in your entire life. And people really don't have even the common sense to understand that you alter dramatically the structure, the molecule structure of anything once you cook it. Now, when I say lung cancer, you immediately say smoking. It comes out of your mouth. It rolls out of your mouth. When I'm in France, they say that. In Germany and Denmark, it rolls out of their mouth. Here's what Dr. Campbell discovered after 50 years of work. Consumption of casein, a milk protein in dairy foods, has a higher correlation with cancer than cigarette smoking does to lung cancer. Do you hear what I just said to you? It is like given that we're going to say smoking lung cancer smoking. He found that all forms of cancer, by far, the number one, heads up, to create cancer out of food is dairy. That means organic dairy, that means raw dairy, and that means a lot of your so-called vegetarian cheeses. Because guess how they make them cheesy? They bond them with casein. So if you don't take heed to that, now here's the most destructive thing that mainstream science is finally waking up to a little bit. Meats leave behind fats and acidity which are ultimately destructive to human health. If you were to ask me why most people get diabetes and cancer and heart disease, it's right there. The meat is bad within itself. But look at this. It leaves that fat and the acidity behind in your body. It takes 3 days. Back when we were still in Boston, we were lucky. We had a lot of volunteers from MIT, from Tufts University, from Harvard, and they used to give us the keys to the labs over there. So a lot of us would go in there at night when the not-so work-endowed academics would go home at 5 o'clock, and we'd do a lot of work, and we learned a lot of things. And one of the things we did learn is how amazingly interesting it was to look at the structures of food and what food structure changes when you alter it in any way. A lot of you now are in blending. I know why you're in blending. It's easier to clean a blender than it is a juicer. How many of you realize that when you blend a food, it kills 85 to 92% of the nutrients in it? Now, nothing wrong with it. Compared to a Coca-Cola or an organic orange juice, great thing. But compared to health, not a great thing. It's a bridge food, as we call it. Now we move on to vitamins. Vitamins act as the umbrella that creates cell structure, the covering on the tent. The old days it was canvas. Today what do we have? Nylon. And that's the vitamin. Now what's ironic in the West, as most of us age, if we touch this edge of a table or fall a little bit, we get brown or black or blue marks and we bleed profusely. Now you don't see that in indigenous cultures in the world. I've been there where 90-year-old people are falling on the ground, laughing and jumping up like kids. No bruises, no cuts, no wounds. But long-term vitamin deficiencies will thin the what? Skin. And that's why you have this transparency and this problem with bruising and wounds, etc. Vitamins are the building blocks of the human cell and therefore of the body. Vitamins are destroyed or changed when heated above 118 degrees, about 42 cells. Vitamins require, listen to this and remember it, oxygen and enzymes to carry them into the cell, which allows a building process to commence. Now, we knew that way back at the turn of the 20th century, by 1917. To digest vitamins, minerals, and proteins, you require oxygen. They also knew at that time enzymes. Now we've added 2 other things in. We can talk about that later. I'll be answering questions for quite a while, too. Then we get to minerals. Minerals and trace minerals help to hold the permanent structure of the cell together and act as a bioelectric conduit. Now, what does that mean? Your body is first and foremost electric. Here is the main schism between Asian medicine and Western so-called modern medicine. 2,000 years ago or before, in Asia, they knew that you were electric. And they treated you electrically. That's what putting a needle here and a needle here has to do with taking care of something here. Because your electrical frequency, they call it the meridian, your wiring, literally, is who you are. Now let's step over here to allopathic medicine. Believe it or not, even though they don't practice electromagnetic medicine, they all 100% know you're electromagnetic. Now, how I can prove that to you is go back to diagnostics. What is a high-speed CAT scan? What is an MRI? What is an ultrasound? They're checking the biofrequency, the electromagnetic frequency of your body's organs. But because the pharmaceutical industry has total control and they sell chemistry, they take you to the top of the mountain to be diagnosed bioelectrically, drag you to the bottom, throw you in the mud, and give you chemicals. This is why at Hippocrates, as you didn't see in this film, we have $1 million worth of electromagnetic frequency equipment now. And I don't bring this in from New Age people somewhere in Mount Shasta. I bring this in from mainstream medicine throughout the world. This is being used in more civilized countries that have compassion for their people. These are the stepping stones for electrical stimuli through the body, minerals. Now, here's the picture I want to give you. And one of the things, after checking thousands and thousands of people's nutrient loads, we are generally all lacking minerals, if not today, at some point. And why minerals are so high in deficiencies is stress burns out minerals. Now, how many of you here have absolutely zero stress? Raise your hand. Good. Here's a lunatic there. There's one too. Now, let me preface it by saying that you and I have taken for granted that we're not stressed or are stressed. I consider myself a very calm guy. I'm not stressed, etc. And a few years ago, I tested my body, and I was lacking at that point magnesium and zinc. And I looked at my diet. I said, my God, I'm taking 10 times more magnesium and zinc than anyone else I know. Magnesium comes in almonds. Great source, by the way. No more, since Kodak's made it so they're cooking the almonds now. So we have to buy our almonds from Europe. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. That's how they force free trade, by the way. Free trade. Number two, I was missing zinc. I'm taking piles of mung beans and piles of pumpkin. So I went from one to another of my biology friends, and finally none of them gave me the right answer. And I went to my friend who used to teach up at Harvard psychology. He said, stress. I said, I'm not stressed. He said, how many days did you travel lecturing last year? I said, stressed. 150 days. Now let's go back in history. Not so long ago, your grandparents and great-grandparents all lived on farms which were all organic. They were lucky if they knew what their neighbors were doing. They certainly probably didn't know what was going on downtown. And I assure you, they really didn't know what was going on in the town next to them. Now I'll give you some names. iPods, cell phones, Blackberries, laptop computers, television, CNN,
Fox News.
Hope none of you watch that. But, if you don't have enough stress in your own life, turn on the television. Who killed who? Who blew up what? And then they started with the new propaganda to control us all.
Terrorists. The terrorists are coming to get you. They're under your bed, the terrorists.
So every night when you go to bed, you're on your knees. There's a terrorist under there. So we're stressed. And so we're all burning out minerals. Now let's go back. If you have enough minerals, and I'm the electric is trying to go from one organ to the other throughout the whole biofrequency of the body, and I'm running really quick and really fast and really well because I have a lot of minerals. But what happens if we lack minerals, which is a common lack, as I just pointed out? Well, me, the electric, have to try to go, over here, and then can I reach it over here, and can I go over here? And you see a major upswing in diseases like, or not diseases, disorders such as fibrillation of the heart, because the electromagnetic frequency doesn't work. The brain flutters, you're confused, a lot early dementia, children not knowing where they're going half the time. And this is really a biofrequency problem because of a lack of minerals. And I'm paused to write a book on this in the next 5 years when I conclude my research of the last 25 years. So it'll be about 30 years at that point. Now, they ground all systems and structurally build hard tissue. That's bone. Now, again, they've also conned you on that. Osteoporosis is a lack of something you can buy from them, calcium. Well, if you're going to talk about nutrients, number one, it's strontium. Number two, it's silica. Number three, yes, calcium. But you'll never, ever in a million years get rid of osteoporosis if you take a supplement, even the one I would tell you to take. You have to lift weight. So what you're really lacking is weightlifting exercise if you have osteoporosis. How do I know that? I've worked with 9,000 women mostly, a few men, but 9,000 women. Not one ever gets well eating exactly like I tell them. But the ones that eat exactly like I tell them and lift weight, they all get well. How about Phyllis that was with us a year ago? Phyllis came to us for 7 weeks. A petite, lovely woman out of Boston. I found out from one of her friends she made at the Institute, one of her fellow students, that she was a child prodigy. At 7, they put her on planes and flew her all over the world to play concert piano, Mozart and Beethoven, etc. And the day she got there, I said, Phyllis, she was in her mid-90s, why are you here? She said, I'm preparing for a new job. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She was going to edit something about Renaissance life. And we looked at her. We have a neat little machine that's really nice because it doesn't poison the body with radioactivity. You put your hand in now, and literally it sees how your whole body is. So don't let doctors zap you anymore. You put your hand in like this. In 5 minutes, we have a readout on your entire body. She had 50% bone density. I was worried that somebody else would sneeze and her body would collapse. No less she sneezed. So I said, now listen. So I sat her in my room, and she said, what should I take for this? And I said, exercise. Now, saying to a woman like this, exercise of her generation, was like me telling her to go on the street and get nude. No, ladies like she never exercised in their life. That wasn't ladylike. So she sort of walked out flustered and came back about half an hour later and said, well, it's only because I trust you I'm going to do this. What do I do next? It was like she was going to the gallows. And I got her with our exercise physiologist, and 6 days a week she did it. And 6 weeks later, her bone density had increased 22%. So don't ever tell me you're too old to lift weight. Don't ever tell me that eating raw food alone is enough. And don't ever tell me that eating raw food gives you all the nutrients you need, because I've just given you absolute science of why that's not true. I eat this way 900%. And if I, every once in a while, lack a few nutrients, like minerals, nobody wants. A man never wants to lack zinc. Why? So you women, you know what you're going to give your men every holiday now? Make holidays up. Ginseng and zinc. Ginseng and zinc. Well, honey, I have a pile of it. That's okay. Take more. And number 2, magnesium. None of us want to lack, men or women, because of what? It relaxes muscle. And what's the most important muscle it relaxes? Marron, the heart. So here we go. Sea and freshwater foods are highest in minerals. Now, when I say seafood, you immediately say, oh, he's going to say fish. Well, fish is not a food for human beings. And I don't know if you've seen the oceanographers and biologists report from less than a year ago where they said in 50 years, by the year 2050, or in 41 years, by the way now, we will have no more fish left in the ocean. How many of you read that? By the year 2050, the rate we're going now, we will not have fish in the ocean anymore. Because we were never meant to eat fish. And when you do eat fish today, I can tell you authentically that it is filled with the highest level of heavy metal toxins anywhere on the planet. If you saw the great story done in National Geographic, it wasn't by a scientist, it was by a brilliant young journalist. He went and had his mercury tested, didn't have a problem. Had one great fish meal at a fine San Francisco fish restaurant, had triple the amount the government said you can have, which really should be none. Government permits it so that everyone would think you're going to die otherwise. So this is how bad it is today. Parasites, amoebas, if I want to give you parasites or amoebas, I give you fish, even after it's cooked. And if you don't believe, if you're such a devotee to that, eating the carcass of a dead fish, basically you get a little microscope. You can even do it with a $29 microscope from Toys R Us. Cook your fish, open it up, and look at it. I assure you, you'll get over fish very rapidly. Now we come back. This is where modern medicine pretty much ends. Again, they may throw essential fats in, and let me tell you, the jury is far from in on essential fats. Everything I read on essential fats, and it's an emerging science, and it's wonderful we know about it, is different. Nobody really has. So one thing we do know is that essential fatty acids are fuels for the cell. That's one thing that we do know. Beyond that, everything else is speculation, made up, and embellishment, and sales pitches. Now we get to what we've unveiled in the raw and organic living food. Hormones. Hormones are chemistries excreted from one cell affecting and engaging another cell. Now, I'll explain that to you. Back in 1996, the Nobel Prize was awarded to two fellows out of Texas who showed us how cells communicate. And it was with what? Hormones. So how important are hormones? My God. What happens if I'm the new cell coming into the body and the dying cell, which happens millions every minute, millions die, millions are born. The new cell is supposed to be told by the old cell what to do. But the old cell doesn't have enough what? Hormones. And so it's supposed to say to the new cell, let's go become a liver. So the new cell says, great, I'm going to go become a liver. But because it doesn't have enough fuel, it says, now the poor new cell is confused, starts to spin in odd directions, becomes mutant, and what will happen if you're lucky, you'll end up with a cystic or a fibroid problem. If you're not, the big C comes. Because every one of us every day have 1% of our cells that are created are mutagenic, or cancer cells. And if we start to make it higher than that 1%, the immune system can handle 1%, we end up with the numbers we have today. If you're 55 years old and younger in the United States and most of Europe, 50% of you will contract cancer in your life. 37% of the general population has cancer now. Men, women, and children. And the sad part from where I sit is the youngest people that are at Hippocrates now are the sickest for the last 15 years. It used to take us 70, 80 years of really bad living to get sick. Now it takes us 15 or 20 years. Because mom and dad, who are totally unconscious and trained consumers from the time they were babies, drive the kids, even if they're educated, through the fast food restaurant on the way in. Because they don't have any time to parent anymore, they stick them in front of the television for 6.5 hours a day, in front of a computer, an iPod, little game toys, and the child contracts cancer. The second killer of children is leukemia. Brain cancer comes in a close second. Only thing that is above that is accidents. Can you imagine that? And when I was a young man, began this work when I was in my 20s, it was such an oddity and a rarity to see a child with cancer. It was shocking. I'll never forget the first little boy. His parents fled the state of Montana, and he had cancer that made him look like he was impregnated, 2.5 years old. And the parents literally were illiterate. They couldn't write and couldn't read. But they knew one thing, they loved their kid. And I said, why did you come here to Boston? They said, well, we heard about you, and we knew that the state of Montana was going to take our boy away if we didn't give him chemotherapy. And we said, why do you think chemotherapy was so bad? He said, well, where we live, all the children get cancer. And every time they give them chemotherapy, they die. Couldn't read and write, but had more common sense than people highly educated, obviously. And so I cried for 2 months after that. Sadly, I'm not crying anymore because I'm almost callous to it. I see it so often. Younger and younger, sicker and sicker. We haven't talked about things like autism, Alzheimer's disease, which was almost a non-significant disorder. Now it's a chronic disorder for people. Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, these things are going. In my presentation to medical schools, I actually have a colleague of mine, Dr. Swilling from here in California, brilliant, wonderful man, and I put together a program that we went out on the road to the universities and showed. And we made it so simple for doctors to understand that all diseases come from certain origins. The first is emotional, by the way. But we didn't look at the emotional, and we looked at the physiological. And when we would leave the universities after these presentations, the doctors had a totally refreshed view on how to look at things. It's not complicated. It's not genetic. It's almost exclusively lifestyle choices that we make. The environment we live in. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But how important are hormones? I just explained to you. Utterly important. If it's that important, where do we naturally get hormones from? Raw, organic, living, vegan food. Brethren, let's say it together. Raw, organic, living, vegan food. People say, well, I'm going to get hormone from raw meat. Well, number one, there's no such thing as raw meat or living meat. If you took an EKG machine and hooked up a piece of fish, sushi as you call it, or uncooked steak, it would be flatlined. There's no electromagnetic biofrequency in the carcasses of an animal. To be alive, to be raw, it has to have biofrequency. Now, that's why vegetables that were picked in Southern California that you're eating here 2 weeks later are condiments in our view. They really have no biofrequency or have very little biofrequency. What you want is something that's bursting with energy at the time you bite into it and that has collected the most sun energy. The three foods that have collected the most sun energy are first and foremost freshwater algae, blue-green and green algae. By far, they're floating around just collecting solar rays through what's called refraction. Refraction is when you have sunlight coming through the water, it splits into a multitude of other UV rays that give different dimensions of UV ray energy to the body cells. The second are seawater algae. Again, you even have further refraction from them. I mean, what is getting more sun than the oceans of the world, which is 70% of the planet? Refraction through salt water, which is like the blood. You have now different levels. It's like notes on a grand piano that you're now getting. And then the top land-based foods are sprouts. As I pointed out, 10, 20, and with the higher ones, 30 times more nutrition. This should be the core of your diet. Unfortunately, with the raw food movement, I see recreation occurring and addiction more than I have rational and nutritional common sense. People are more interested in perpetuating their sugar addictions and fat addictions than they are becoming healthy. So let's keep rolling. Hormones are messengers that allow cellular communication, fundamental for all body and brain function. First time I ever heard of a hormone, when I was a teenager, I learned the word horny. How many of you remember that? Now, horny is one of millions and millions and millions of emotions that we have in our life. But let me tell you, everything you think, feel, sense, understand, instinct is hormonal. Hormones, often born in the endocrine system, the glands, allow you to function at the highest level of performance. A little sub-study that I've been doing now for the last 25 or 30 years is I've been looking at people who are really highly successful. Olympic-level athletes with gold medals, CEOs of major corporations, happily married couples for 50 or 60 years. Guess what I'm finding? That unanimously they all have balanced hormones. So really, I have that part of the story. I just don't know how to get us all back to balanced hormones because our hormones are so whacked. As a matter of fact, the number one reason for cancer today is you have pretentious, make-believe estrogens in your body that are created from man-made chemicals made out of oils, petrochemicals. A lot of you are sitting here right now, by the way, at a health conference wearing polyester underwear, giving yourself potential cancer as we sit here now. And it's really funny, the young girls today, they don't only wear polyester underwear over their buttocks, they actually stick it right up the crack to get it right in. It's like amazing. My wife next year in 2010 has a book coming out called Killer Clothes. It's exposing the clear science of how clothes give us diseases. And it's not only cancer, by the way, people. It's emotional disorders, brain problems, etc., right down the list, with evidence. As we were finishing this book 2 months ago, we sent our researcher to Berkeley here. They were having a major, major international conference on formaldehydes and fire retardants on clothes. And there are a handful of credible, good men and women in medicine and research today that know that that's causing such incredible problems. Do you know by law, sleeping garments here and in Europe have to have fire retardants on it or they can't sell it? Now, let me tell you, by the time your child went on fire, you wouldn't be worrying about fire retardant clothes. So this is a chemical ploy from the chemical industry in Washington, in London, in Paris, etc. Hormones lay the groundwork for all thought and emotion. So again, go back. If you want to be stable in everything that you do and clear in everything you do, you've got to balance your hormones. You've got to get rid of those environmental estrogens. Non-organic food. What do you think carries the most? Fats. So meats and dairy food have the most, but it doesn't mean a pesticide-riddled vegetable doesn't have it too. Fungicides, herbicides, etc. And here, they allow us to relate with others and our environment more than the spoken word. I always say to people, sometimes I'm fortunate I do 4-day conferences with people. And I'm with a guest at the Institute for 3 weeks sometimes. I say, I don't care if you remember a word I say, but if you feel what I say, That's where we've achieved it. And I mean that. And that's the hormonal connection we have. When I met my wife in Stockholm, Sweden, back in the late 70s, I was with Ann Wigmore. They flew us in to do a major conference for 2 days in a gourmet vegan restaurant being born there in the middle of Stockholm. And I looked at my wife, never said a word to her, and fell in love with her like that. And I mean fell in love. I love her every day more. Now, I didn't know if she spoke. I didn't know what language she spoke. I didn't know if she'd understand me. What is that? That's hormones, people. And your senses are how you use hormones externally. Some of you like the ocean. That's a hormonal connection. Some of you like high mountains. Some of you like green forest. All hormonal connections. And if you're a little confused in your life and feel uncomfortable all of the time, I promise you, without even looking at your hormonal panel, you don't have balanced hormones. Then we get to oxygen. Food-based oxygen is essential for nutrition absorption and the increase of hemoglobin. Remember what we said earlier? 1917. We knew that you couldn't digest a nutrient unless you had oxygen available, unless you had enzymes available. Guess what? Where do you get oxygen-based nutrition? Let's go, brethren. Raw, organic, living, vegan food. Come on. Raw, organic, living, vegan food. Once you cook a food, what leaves it? The oxygen. And I always joke about this, but it's true. When you're cooking something, the fragrance coming from it is literally the oxygen molecule leaving it. So when you cook, breathe heavily over the pot. That's the best part of it. Oxygen is the most important of all elements, and we cannot exist without it for more than 7 minutes. That's apparent, I would hope. And the only other place beside breathing that you get oxygen naturally is food. Think of that. And I don't care if you're a yogic master. None of us breathe well enough on this planet anymore. There's so much particulate stuff floating around in the air. We now breathe approximately half the oxygen we did 100 years ago. The geological anthropologists tell us that probably at one point in human history, there were species of humans that were breathing up to 7 times the amount of oxygen we are now. Can you imagine that? If we were breathing 6 times or 5 times more, we'd all pass out. We couldn't handle it. Oxygen regulates metabolism. Someday when I want to sell out and make money, I'm going to write a fat reduction book. That's how people make money in the health industry. It's going to be eat oxygen, get skinny. Because one of the things I know, and you know this too, the more oxygen you get into your body, the more regulated your weight is. And that's why exercise reduces weight in one of the great ways. It carries fat out of the body. It carries chemicals out of the body. I went down to my colleague, Dr. Kenneth Cooper, about 5 years ago, and I said, Kenneth, he's been sending people to us for a long time. I said, you know our program. Yes, I do. I know your program. Any of you know Kenneth Cooper? He's a type AA person, a wonderful man. He's a god of exercise. He validated exercise as an essential part of human living and has done over half a century of incredible research on exercise. I said, now let's sit down and look at what importance aerobic exercise and weightlifting exercise has to do with healing when you're on the raw food. 3.5 hours later, we figured out that it would actually increase the healing process from 7 to 8 times. Listen to what I'm saying to you. So, sitting on your butt eating food and not doing aerobic exercise is going to take you 7 or 8 times longer to heal, 7 or 8 times longer to slow down the aging process. Do you follow what I'm saying to you? Why, all of us who live properly on raw food never age the way the rest of the population does isn't because we just eat raw food. It's I was at the gym here for 3 hours this morning. I didn't see one of you there. We could probably walk there in 8 minutes from here. It's not all about food, people, but I don't want to get off on that. That's another 4-day talk we could do. Oxygen provokes hemoglobin in the red blood cell. How many doctors or nurses are here? When we see a blood test, it's just habit now. First thing we look at is hemoglobin levels. Because if it's good, we smile. If it's low, that's when you start to worry. Hemoglobin levels going down, whoop. And that means that you're not containing the oxygen within the red blood cell. Almost always because of a B12 deficiency, by the way, which is one supplement we tell every man, woman, and child on the earth to take every day, a bacterial form. And if you go back into the archives of the Hippocrates website and look at our magazines. I published excerpts from a scientific paper I wrote on that after 3 years of work on it, and showing that anatomically we've changed. So even meat eaters have B12 deficiencies equal or higher than we have at this point today. That's a whole other story. Oxygen plays a central role in the ingestion of all nutrients. Then we get to phytochemicals. I just had a meeting 2 days ago in Portland, Oregon, with a man who heads up the Oregon State Linus Pauling Center. They are doing remarkably brilliant work there. I applauded him. I was so excited. I left. I'm in the middle of writing a scientific book that I hope can be used as a textbook at university level to show why food heals disease better than any other thing we've ever learned in history. And they agreed to help on this. And what he told me the other day, as an example, I can't divulge all of it, they found something in vanilla that's going to be remarkable in the next 2 to 3 years. Vanilla. I mean, if you haven't been reading the work about curcuminoids from turmeric, you've been dead for the last 5 years. I mean, every time I pick up a scientific journal on turmeric, it's like the only thing they said it hasn't helped with that is having you fly. I mean, it's like amazing. Tumor is this, heart disease this, diabetes this, antioxidant this. And so we're finding more and more and more there's small groups of highly qualified, good women and men globally that are on the right track. And slowly but surely we're going to chip away, as Hippocrates has for 53 years, and get this into the mainstream. So this is going to be the normal, and we're going to say, you mean at one point we literally gave deadly chemicals to people? We literally gave radioactivity after Chernobyl, after 3 Mile Island. When people had cancer, we gave them radioactivity? I mean, what insanity this is. But, people are gullible because that's where the money is. Phytochemicals are natural occurring biochemicals found in raw plant foods. The phytochemicals are uniquely designed by nature to protect the body from disease. The #1 place in the United States doing phytochemical research is Oregon State Linus Pauling Center. What they told me the other day is that you're right, Brian, that when you cook, the vast majority of phytochemicals are neutered and not effective. Where 15 years ago I had on the radio a debate with a woman out of Johns Hopkins who was then saying if you cook tomatoes, you get more lycopene. So it was wonderful. This is a fun story, I'll tell you. Loosen up a little bit. She wanted to be on the radio. They called me, a very astute interviewer from Baltimore, and said, would you like to be on with her? Because she's saying the opposite of what you're saying, that things have to be raw. So I had to really keep biting my tongue because she was saying really absurd things for the first 15 minutes. And all I said is, uh-huh, mm-hmm, uh-huh, mm-hmm. And he finally stopped her and said, Dr. Clement, would you like to say anything? And I said, this is an honor for me to be on the radio with you, doctor, because you have invented a whole new form of molecular science that didn't exist before. I said, all I know is that I was taught that when you process or cook a molecule, it bursts, and you lessen the potentiality of it. You're now saying when you cook something, you literally manifest something that wasn't there to begin with. And there was dead silence. Because they can precipitate this upon the public, but not somebody who knows basic 101 on this. And I said, listen to me. I said, you mean to tell me, and I was being kind and nice, I wasn't being offensive to her. I said, you mean to tell me that you think that that's what really occurs, that you manifest something that wasn't existing? I said, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. But what I thought is that you opened up the cellular structure. Now you could literally see more of the phytonutrients, so you could count them. I said, but I know that's wrong, doctor, and you must be right. Now, can you imagine this? And I'll bet $1 million, and I never did check this out, that somewhere the tomato processing industry funded some of those studies. Just like every November, we have some new study coming out about how good alcohol is for you. Or the chocolate industry tells you how wonderful that is. Let me tell you, right down the road, they're going to give you, they know the old Atkins approach. Tell them what they want, and you're going to make a lot of money. And so that's literally what they do. They get all of the addicts to be further addicts under the auspices of health now. Phytochemicals isolate and destroy disease. Different raw vegetables, fruits, and sprouts work against different disorders, i.e. sulfates in broccoli sprouts are highly effective in destroying all forms of cancer. The highest level of phytochemicals are found in germinated seeds such as wheatgrass, speltgrass, kamutgrass, barleygrass, millet, amaranth, and buckwheat. Now, what's really interesting is all of this worldwide global research on phytochemicals has validated what we've done for over half a century. They've literally spent billions and billions of dollars to tell us how what we've done worked. I can't stop reading this stuff. It's amazing. In my book, Life Force, probably the best thing I've ever written about nutrition is a chapter on the sprout pharmacy, because they have now told us that germinated seeds have the highest amount of phytochemicals in it. Wheatgrass, by the way, we know for sure from several different phytochemical studies, kill every form of cancer, kill the 2 forms of viruses, rhino and retroviruses, and kill every form of bacteria they've ever tested with it. So now we know why it's a magic food. So where do you find phytochemicals? Brethren, here we go. Raw, organic, living, vegan food. And then we get to enzymes. Again, the enthusiasts with the raw food community write a lot about enzymes, and they're correct. Enzymes are not the only, it's one leg on the table. But enzymes are important. Housed by proteins that carry electrons to our bioelectric bodies for every function that our body performs. Now, improperly and incorrectly, when you're in school studying science, biology, they tell you that a protein is what an enzyme is. That's like me walking in here, never seeing any of you, and saying all you are is a skin on the outside of your body. Would you be offended if I said that? Of course. Some of you would say, well, I have bones at least, I have organs at least, I have a bloodstream. Some would say I have an emotional state, a spiritual state. Who would be right, me or you? Well, my wife and I found out that the top genetics laboratory in the country, Jackson, up in Bar Harbor, Maine, gave tours. So we went on that tour and we sort of lingered behind in the doorway of the woman who ran the electron microscope. And we convinced her that we liked microscopes. And 3 hours later, we were sitting there looking at it. Just happened to be inside of the purse of my wife. We brought a lot of different specimens. A lot were enzymes. And what we found with enzymes, interesting, is that these food-based enzymes do not look at all like other proteins. They look like a basketball on fire with 2 balls, little balls in the middle of them. Must be masculine, I don't know. Come on, have a sense of humor. And what we know is that what an enzyme is the way your bioelectric body gets its electric. Do you follow that? And we're sure of this. It's just going to take some time for this to be validated in mainstream. But we're sure of this. Because when we give biofrequency, and go back to my colleague and my good friend, Valerie Hunt, who started this at UCLA in 1948, as a woman who created the field of biofrequency medicine. She's 93. She did the foreword to my upcoming book. I'll see her at the end of September. Extraordinary human being. This woman is light years ahead of the rest of the scientific community. First woman ever hired in the California school systems. Higher education. Had 3 PhDs by the time she was 27 and hired. And she said, your body is not what you think it is, it's frequency. Back in the 80s, she actually took a young man who was an athlete, sat him down with a McDonald's meal, and did a motion film of him. You literally saw the biofrequency reduce every time he swallowed. Now, this is all you really need to know about nutrition, by the way, people, till it was non-existent practically at the end. I thought it was the next day. She just corrected me in Santa Barbara about 6 months ago. She said, oh, no, it was 10 minutes later. We had him drink water and sit his ass down again, she said. Sat him down again, put a sprout salad and a green juice in front of him. You literally saw the biofrequency increase every time he swallowed. Now, let me tell you, 5 minutes of that film should be enough to wake everyone up. But no, we need some convoluted Mickey Mouse thing because we really don't want to do what's right. We really don't want to use common sense and instinct. We want to be an intellectual and do something so that we can fraudulently move in the wrong direction. Biofrequency is the most important part of who you are. You wouldn't function without electric. Enzymes are the catalyst of all life. How many of you have ever seen the wonderful film made in Stockholm 35 years ago where they went in with a microscopic camera to a woman's body and watched the sperm come down the canal till it went through the spongy tissue at the end? This is the best film I've ever seen. I like film, but this is it. This is it. I mean, I'm still in awe of this. I've seen it 100 times and still sit with my mouth open dropped. Okay, A Life is Born. It's now in the National Geographic series. Nissan did it. Now, what you have to know is that the spongy tissue is permeated by the sperm, which has a tail, but it moves so fast to get through the spongy tissue when it sees the egg. It's like we guys, when we see you girls, woo! You know, we're all macho until we see you. Then, woo! And it gets through the whoop! And then you see it hit, and on film, and the commentator says, an enzyme activity has just begun human life. So it's an electrical spark from an enzyme that literally unites with the egg and creates the fetus, you. Ironically, when we die, what is it that breaks our body back down to the soil again? Enzymes. So I don't want to get philosophical, but if we had time, I would. Everything is little pieces of electric. Some are called shares, some are called streets, some are called you. Even the invisible is electric, just less. And we're connected by that electric, so it's a continuum. We're constantly born and constantly dying, just like the cells in the body, just like the planet itself, just like the universe as we know it. We're a continuum. And my God, if you want to plug into that continuum, you have got to have electrical frequency that matches the electrical frequency of all else. And the way that nature, God, if you would place that to be taken, is in raw, organic, living food. Here we go, brethren. How do you get enzymes? Raw, organic, living, vegan food. Once you cook the food, none. It is enzyme activity that literally sparks human life when sperm and egg unite. Enzymes are essential electric charges which switch essential physical functions on and off as needed. Enzymes are housed within proteins, but are not only proteins. Do you follow? So don't let anyone in the scientific community fool you on that. Say, doctor, you're right, they're proteins, but they're unique proteins that give me more than just structure. Now we move to the 7 essential aspects of living food. Then the rest of the time we have together, I'll answer questions. Antioxidants provide superior protection from free radicals. I was speaking to one of my colleagues over here earlier. Johns Hopkins just put a study out. They said, oh my God, we just found 2 other powerful elements in antioxidants. Listen closely. We found that now antioxidants literally switch off receptor sites in cancer cells, even after one has cancer. You know how important that finding was? But most antioxidants that you know about are chemicals in a bottle that are made at a laboratory, and they tell you they're antioxidants. And what antioxidants are supposed to be protecting you from is free radicals. We'll get to that in a minute. Free radicals, as my good friend from the South said, is like having fire in the body. And that fire just goes from one place to the other and eats up and kills all the healthy parts of who you are. And he's right. And so the antioxidants from raw organic food literally put muscle on the cell, and now we know actually shut off the receptor sites of mutated cells. So they protect when the free radical comes, a fire to burn it, it protects it and punches it and says, no way. So you need antioxidants. Vitamins from living food are full spectrum and complete. Now take a breath and listen. A lot of you come and listen to people like me talk to you. And you assume that we all know everything there ever will be to know about nutrition. Well, the older I get, I'm about 60 now, every year I realize I know less. Now, what we do know is that if you don't mess with food, even if we haven't discovered everything that's in there, you're going to find it. It was only 1948 when we discovered the first phytochemical. It wasn't until 1992 until we got serious about it. Now, it's by far the most significant finding in the history of nutritional science. What could be more important than nature put in its plants millions and millions of years ago, way before humans ever even were a faint idea here? And those chemicals are going to prevent and eliminate diseases in humans that didn't exist at the time the plant was here. If you don't think that's powerful, you're detached from reality. Now, that wasn't discovered until recently. Can you imagine? Tomorrow we may find another vitamin in a whole food called rink. And everyone next week is going to say, oh, of course, rink is the #1 most important thing. But if you don't play with it, don't cook it, don't mess it, don't blend it, don't dish it, you're going to get everything in there. So watch. Minerals and trace minerals saturate living food and provide essential elements not found in other foods. Another discovery my wife's come up with, she's one of the leading authorities on microscopic work, and I apologize for her. We are just filled at the Institute, as always, and there's a whole lot of very ill people, so one of us had to be there at this point. She was sorry and asked me to say she was sorry for not being here. You have to listen to me yell at you for an extra few minutes then. But what we've learned is that below every mineral from a living food source, there's little fairy minerals, or little particulate, subparticulate moving like this. Now, we don't know what they are because we've asked 100 people that are much brighter than we are in these subjects, and everyone gave me a different answer. So that means we don't really know what it is yet. If 20 of them gave me the same answer, I'd start to think, well, that's maybe what it is. But what we do know is when you cook the food, they're gone. These little subparticulate fairies that go below every one. Now, we may find out tomorrow or 100 years from now that they're more important than anything else we discovered so far. But the microscopes will get better. We're looking at 10,000 times, by the way. When you see a particle, it's 10,000 times larger is what we're looking at. But we're going to, in the near future, go up to 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, and start to see the quantum or the subparticulate levels of things. Protein is found in the most complete and absorbable form, helping to build your cells in optimized ways. This is one of the big lacks in the raw food community. You don't get enough protein. Again, the Hippocrates diet is by far the most protein-rich diet on the planet. I'll stand toe-to-toe with anyone who eats any diet. I'm going to show them that you'll get extraordinary amounts of protein eating this way compared to any other program. That's why we do very well with Olympic athletes. If you haven't learned about the new product that just came out, for those of you who are lazy, it's Sun Warrior. That's an amazing product. Sun Warrior is 85% digestible protein because it's fermented down. It's something that I know I've been so worried about these bodybuilders because they all come to us with kidney failure at 40 and 50 years old. There's a non-digestible protein like soy or ungodly whey, and this is a substitute for it. But, you know, a lot of them, the algae are complete protein. I mean, blue-green algae is 54% protein. You know, Michael's E3 Live over there today, nothing beats that. And then number 2, green algae is 52% protein. Sprouts are 30%, 40% protein in some cases. And most important, they're already pre-digested proteins, as is the rice powder I spoke about, because it's what? Fermented down already. So soybeans have a lot of protein. They're not part of our program. Why? You can't digest them. The second thing is they're a culprit. They put environmental estrogens in the body because they've been messing with them now for thousands and thousands of years. So they're no longer the original soy, but they are something that hormonally is whacked out and elevates estrogens. And by the way, when you elevate estrogens, you don't only feminize men, you masculate women. And for the first time in recorded history, what we do know now is that women are being born 2% higher than men. That was miraculous when you knew this in the past. Penile size of one generation from soy formulas reduced by 1/2 inch. Now, this is real science. We're not talking about mysticism here. One generation, formula consumption, 1/2 inch of penile size. Women become more masculine because your body compensates to create testosterone when you have too much estrogen, and men become more feminine. And so watch yourself. And that's not the only point, but when you feminize and masculate a population, you now take away the potentiality for the spread of the species, the continuation of the species. Electrical charge increases the biofrequency of the cell, preventing premature aging and disease. Besides the antioxidant putting muscle on the cell, you also want electrical shields around the cell that you get from what? The enzymes. And the electrical shield, when the fire comes, along with the muscle, it pushes it away. And we actually see this happening. This isn't a theory we have. We see it microscopically happening. Energy abounds and exponentially increases as you consume more life-giving food. What's amazing to those of us who have lived this way for long periods of time, we actually feel a new level of health every year. I'm not going to say at 100 you're going to be able to do what you did at 50, but you're going to feel a new level of strength. It's almost an emotional stability, a spiritual stability strength that happens. And yes, physiologically you're able to do what you need to do. Humans were built to eat a 100% raw food diet. Humans and the animals we control are the only creatures on the earth that do not do this. I had the great fortune of visiting 2 tribes of people that live well beyond 100 commonly. Guess what? They're eating almost all plant-based and raw diets. But really why people live a long time is not eating raw. I know a whole lot of lunatics that eat raw food too. It's a head. You've got to be happy. And that's why happiness is the most important way to live a good life and to be harmonious on this planet, to make everything function as happily as you perceive your life. And then last from my book, Longevity. I think they have my book, Longevity, and they have Life Force, which this is from up in the store. Longevity will increase by consuming maximum nutrition in the most digestible form. Punchline, less food, more vitality. I looked at 27 international studies, had my poor wife working on them, converting them to English. And what we found is a one thread when it came to nutrition, beyond the happiness thing, is that everyone said if you eat the highest quality food in the smallest amount, you have the least disease and live the longest. One chapter in my upcoming book, be out next year, is on caloric intake. One thing everyone agrees with, the top geneticists in the world are on board with this, is that you will prolong life by probably 30% by reducing your dietary intake by 30%. So a lot of the cheerleaders out there tell you about how important it is to get a lot of calories. I'm telling you that mainstream science, including what I know, is the less caloric intake you have of high-quality nutrients, the less disease you have, and by far, the longer you're going to live. That's where I'm going to end. We'll spend the next 25, 30 minutes answering questions. We'll start in the back of the room and move forward. Anyone that has a question, make sure I repeat it. Yes, please stand up. Well, if you have nut allergies, you probably preclude the allergy by taking seeds and growing them into greens. In about 98.5% of the cases, you'll eliminate allergic reaction to nuts and seeds by germinating them. Now, I would avoid initially all nuts. And the nut all of you should avoid are cashews and peanuts to begin with. They're not really edible foods for anyone. But other ones are great for most people, but if you have an allergy, no. Move over to get the protein sources from seeds, like chia seeds, like flax seeds, sprout all of these, like hemp seeds. You can't do that here, but if you're outside of America, Canada and the rest of the civilized world, Europe, you can sprout. I was part of a study 5 years ago in London where we actually showed the effect it had on fatty acids in the brain, which is 15% of the brain, is 77% more intake of fatty acids when you sprout them versus eat them the way they are. And so there's a whole lot of great choices. Once you germinate them into greens, you won't have a reaction to them the way you would normally. Anyone over here? Yes?
Hi, Brian. Don Weaver. You probably know I'm a big advocate of soil remineralization worldwide. I wonder what your views are on replenishing those minerals.
Well, I can't speak enough. One of my good friends on soil remineralization is Josh in Florida. He's one of the great organic farmers in the country. And Josh, he was a tough kid in New York when he was growing up, so his mother didn't know how to deal with him because he was fatherless, so sent him to the Amish people when he was 12, 13 years old. And the Amish straightened his butt out pretty well. And now he's become such an extraordinary farmer. I mean, when I actually drive, because he's down about an hour and a half from us in West Palm Beach, in Hollywood, to get his food, and an hour and a half back when the rare time I'm home on the weekend. Because this food is miraculous. You know that. I'm preaching to the choir with you. But if you don't have enough minerals in the soil, you don't have enough nutrients, bioactivity in the soil, organic matter, good bacteria, you are not going to have healthy food. I don't care if it's organic or not organic. Look at the study that just came out of Britain about 3 months ago that said when they compared organic food, mainstream organic food, to regular food, the nutrient level was not that much different. And I'm not going to say they were wrong. They were right. Because nobody's growing, I shouldn't say nobody, very few people are growing in proper soil. And when Anne wrote the book, Organic Soil, The Perfect Diet, she was right. Because if we don't start with the right soil, I don't care what you're growing, even if you don't spray it, it's not going to nourish and build the body strong. Anyone here? Up a little bit, yes.
Where do you get the diet?
Where do you get the diet?
Yeah, you're talking about Hippocrates' diet.
Well, again, you can either come to Hippocrates, as 250,000 people have done, and we're in West Palm Beach, Florida, and there's, how many of you signed this? You can get on the magazine list. That's been handed around. If you haven't signed that and want to be on the magazine. You can also go and get books they have in the store over there. Life Force is one of the many books I've written. So there's lots of ways that you can learn more about this. Anyone over here? Okay, yes. No, because we learn the hard way. When I first... About fruit. Yes, excuse me. They can't break me on this one. I never remember to repeat this. Keep kicking my shin on that one. When I first became a raw fooder, it was quite easy because I was just substituting my sugar addiction for fruit addiction. It's the same. Look at the Yale study that came out recently. If you look at this month's Scientific magazine, it actually shows you they discovered that fructose, that comes from fruit, carrot juice, beet juice, causes more type 1 diabetes than glucose. Okay. So 30 years ago, the woman who put Hippocrates on the map, and why it was important to me at that point, is I became director in 1980. Came back from Europe. I was developing and running centers there. Came back. They asked me to direct the institute. I very shortly realized that it wasn't Ann Wigmore or Victoria Skolvinskis, or certainly not me, that made the institute popular. It was a wonderful woman from Southern California called Edie Mae Hunsberg. And Edie Mae Hunsberg wrote a book that sold 1 million copies called How I Conquered Cancer Naturally. And she and I became very good friends because she was quietly up here doing science with the Linus Pauling Foundation and some doctors down in San Diego to show why her cancers went away when she was told she had only a few months to live. And so we resonated well. Her husband was an inventor, brilliant guy. And she called me 30-some years ago and said, Brian, my cancer's not coming back, but my tumors are. Now, I would hold my breath because I realized that 70% of the people that came to Hippocrates then in Boston came through her book. And I felt, oh my God, why is Edie's cancer coming back? This happened for 3 years. So we were on a cliff for several months every year, freaking out, saying, oh my God, her cancer's coming back. And finally she realized what happened. All of her neighbors were date growers. They would pick dates, give her boxes of it, and as I would have done at that point, she was eating 2, 3, 4 pounds of dates a day. Date season stopped, the tumors went away. So this freaks me out because my diet then must have been 50% fruit because I was as high as a kite like everyone else on sugar. And so basically, I reluctantly, but had to because I couldn't be a liar anymore on this, I pulled 9 of our affluent guests aside and I said, look, will you do us a favor and do weekly blood tests for at least a couple of months? And I took 5 completely off any form of sugars and 4 on. 30 years ago, we took fruit out of the Hippocrates diet. Because what we realized is a group that was off all forms of sugar were increasing, improving, blood test was amazing, the differentials, immunological system was fully functional, they were getting better. And the group that wasn't was either not getting better fast or not getting better at all. Things like low blood sugar and diabetes, hypoglycemia and diabetes, were never really getting well at that point. I don't work with any of those people now, type 2 or low blood sugar, that don't get well. And so we pulled it out, and boy, was it hard. I mean, it was hard enough for me to tell people to be vegans and eat raw food then. And so they wanted to throw tomatoes at me and, hang me on the stage when I said get rid of, because everyone is addicted to sugar. Even the allopathic journals today tell us the most addictive substance isn't heroin or alcohol, it's sugar. And again, what we do, and I hate to tell the truth, but it's the truth, is we give up the obvious bad sugars and we take up the not so obvious but the bad sugars. I mean, I used to sit literally and eat 10 mangoes at a sitting, 30-pound watermelons, a half a gallon, I should say, of carrot juice, putting beet juice in. In Europe, that's where they get their sugar. Now, thank God, since then, the sensible group is growing. Johns Hopkins just wrote an article a year ago. It's as if I wrote it. It said, if you have cancer, avoid all forms of sugar, including fruit, including carrot juice. What is a PET scan? A PET scan shows you how it feeds disease. PET scan is where they inject sugar into your body. When the cancer goes to eat it, it glows. And why it's so relevant is that it shows where the cancer may be moving to or tracking to or metastasizing to. Most effective of all cancer things. But it does it with viruses, it does it with molds, it does it with yeast, it does it with fungus. And so we've got to eliminate them for a period of time until we recover. And then very small amounts, always having to be organic, always having to be ripe, and always having to be small amounts once you're well. Not because you think you're well, or some enthusiast who doesn't know better is telling you that you need fruit. but because you're well. And we think you're well when we look at several blood tests that are relevant, your immune system is functional, not because we believe you're well. Anyone over here? Yes? Sure. Blending, of course, oxidizes food. Now, without blended food at the beginning, I would not have been on this program. Because when people move in from the Western diet to a living diet, what you need is a lot of stuff. You need to look like, taste like, feel like, and act like cooked food. So blenders make that happen. We can blend things up, dehydrate them, etc. But how you destroy something is you expose it to oxygen. That's what rusting is. That's what those of us who are aging, having happened to us too, we're oxidizing at some level. So with that saying, the best way to oxidize something is take a very good machine, and the better the machine, the more this happens, by the way. Split the cells open, bring the nutrition out, and then expose it to oxygen. Thousands of times a minute, this thing's blowing oxygen through it. How blenders work is oxygen. If you took away the oxygen, the blender wouldn't work. It would break, you know. And so you destroy 85 to 92% of the nutrients. Now, does that mean if you're giving up Pepsi-Cola and hot dogs and moving to blended food, I would discourage it? No. If you're getting rid of a major disease, I would tell you, please don't consider that a nutritious food. Consider that a recreational food. And then juice. What's the difference between juices? Well, people like the Vitamix company tell you that blenders are good because you get the fiber. Number one, why you take juice is not to have the fiber. So it doesn't slow down the process of digestion. I can give somebody with no digestion juices, and in 15 to 20 minutes, it's in the bloodstream, all the nutrients. The blood of the plant is the juice. That's where the nutrients are. And if you get the proper juicer, the double orgo juicers, or the better one auger juicers, it's like the teeth. Thousands of pounds of pressure, squeezing deeply into the cell, getting 1.5 to 2 times more juice than you would under the other circumstance. And you then immediately drink that, because if not, it dies too, by the way. You have to immediately drink it. It's now going to go in and be used by the body. A blender, blowing everything through it, killing 85 to 92% of it, putting roughage down your throat. I mean, 2 things I still tell you to do with food I struggle with. Everything else I have down 100%. Chewing is one. I find myself on the phone, driving to my lecture, with the salad sitting here sometimes. And if I'm teaching you not to chew well, have a hard time chewing, how many of you are chewing well enough? I mean, really. Are you sitting there? I'm teaching it. I don't do it. Chewing 50 times? It's like Walker said the right thing. Walker said you've got to drink your food that you chew, and you've got to chew your juice. Now, I don't do that. Now, what happens if you take roughage and pour it down the throat and don't let it mix with enzymes in the mouth, and it's 85% dead already? Well, you're going to get a lot of fermentation, a lot of problems here. Another thing is, a lot of people in the raw food community, the cheerleaders, not the players, say odd things to you, like you can mix fruits and vegetables together. That's chemistry, love. Chemistry is chemistry. You're not going to take that. It's just like the people who say coconut oil is not a saturated fat. Well, it is a saturated fat. If you eat enough of that all of the time, you end up with high cholesterol. How do I know that? 16 years of looking at it. Thousands of people. And so one of the reasons that we have a problem bringing this into the mainstream and saving so many more lives is because we make innuendo and we make decisions based upon our own addictiveness rather than validity and science. And that's one of the problems. Anyone over here? Yes.
If you're a raw food, I mean a person that cooks food, right, and they go on a raw diet,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the toxicity starts coming out of your body, will your bones hurt, your body starts hurting, and the toxicity coming out of your body?
Yes. I mean, you can't be crazy. If you already have a pre-diagnosed disease that would have to do with bones, we can't say everything's detoxification. But yes, I've seen thousands of people over the last 40 years, including myself, that had bones hurt, organs hurt, gallbladder hurt, liver hurt, nauseous, throw up, headaches, perspiration, odor that was just so offensive you have to leave the room after yourself. I mean, these things do happen. But again, it's not from the raw food. It's from the precipitation of normalization of the biochemistry of the body, pushing out the things that you've collected as a hobby over your life. It may be bacterial problems that you're seeing, microbial problems that you're seeing coming out of the body. Quite often is a chemistry or heavy metal poison that's coming out of your body. And bones quite often harbor that. And so these are things that we often feel. But don't let somebody tell you, unless they are well-educated and experienced, that everything's detoxification. Because it could be a serious problem that you need medical intervention with, too, sometimes. Yes?
I'm curious about getting kids onto a raw food diet, and are there any special needs for kids? And then also, any recommendations that you would have, because it's such a different diet than...
Well, I have 4 children, but we have a unique experience, so let me preface that. They grew up with a mother and father that this is how we live. And all 4 of my children, when they were 5, 6, or 7, one is in the back of the room. She just graduated college now. She was my little girl. And basically, basically they would come to us and say, "You mean, Daddies, people really kill animals and eat them?" They didn't get that concept. And we'd say, and we never estranged them from their friends. What we would do is we would go through the back door of the child's party with blue bowls and basically put, the rice ice cream and the food, the cookies in there, etc., and tell them that's what you eat, and always have enough for the other children. So we didn't want to make them strange. So number one, if you're married to Tilla the Hun, that's the first problem. Because one of the most unfortunate things is insecure men always want to be around a lot of meat. Because one of the great marketing ploys in my generation, and even younger men, is they actually equated masculinity to meat consumption. I remember being told in grade school and high school, if you want to be macho, you got to eat meat. So we would have these, undiscussed meat-eating competitions. We'd go to a steakhouse and say, cook it a little bit. And the next guy would say, don't even cook it. We'd be chewing it. We'd have these cavemen mentality. So if you have an insecure guy, that's to begin with. But even if you have one of them, if he has any sense and love in his heart, you may sit with him and say, look, we love the child. I know you may not want to do this, honey, but please, let's both make sure our children get the best, and here's what we mean. So there's not a battle and a fight. Number 2, you've got to find other families that do this. You're the mother. No matter how hip you think you are, your kids think you're square. And so you've got to find other families that the other kids who are a little bit older always say, wow, man, it's really cool to eat a sprout. And they're over there eating sprouts. And so all at once, not mommy imposing some strange, weird thing onto me. It's like little Johnny over there who's like 2 years older. He's like a hip guy. He wears blue jeans now. That guy, he's eating this way too, so it's sort of normal. And where do you live? Here?
No, I live in Sun Valley, Idaho.
Well, you have a conscious community there. You're not in the middle of, Iowa or somewhere. And so, I'm sorry. But you have a conscious community there. And so you'll find people, and you'll be surprised. Get on the internet. Next, you have to make this user-friendly. If you've been polluting your children, you don't come home and say, okay, we're going to take wheatgrass implants and sprout salads. You may first have to get them off the other hot dogs to the junky bad hot dog that are better than the other hot dog. You may have to get Boca burgers rather than hamburgers, and do the step-by-step. And just add more things like juices in, and add more things like supplements in. I don't think a child should grow up today without algae in their diet. What that does for brain development, for protein regulation, for anatomical strengthening, genetics, actually prolongs lifespan. Major boatloads of evidence on that. That should be B12, I've already told you. Not the 98% that are in the marketplaces. Bacterial forms. We're one of the many companies that make that. The Life Give products make that, but there are other companies that do. And so these are the things that you do. My wife and I wrote a little booklet called Children, the Ultimate Curation. That would help you. And then my colleague, Dr. Michael Clapper, wrote a wonderful book called Vegan Children. And I think that's out of print, but you'll find it on the internet. If you get those 2 books, and what we did is from the time you're in the womb, the baby's in the womb till they're teenagers, little tips on what we've learned over the years. Okay, up here, yes.
How and why are animal proteins so different from plant proteins?
Well, number 1, all protein and all life on this earth comes from where? Okay. Why are animal proteins different than plant proteins? Okay. Where does all life on this planet come from? The sun. Let's give this guy a hand. 1 out of 150 people at least knew it. Now, the way we get all nutrients, not just protein, all nutrients, is this extraordinary process. It's called solar collection on the leaf of a plant. So the leaf of a grass or a plant comes out, captures UV rays, and converts it over to protein. Pretty much, if you know basic science, everything's protein-based. everything, your skin, everything. And so what we now know is that if you got to the grass or you got to the plant, you're getting unadulterated proteins. Now, when we take it one step more, we take something like a sunflower that has all the 9 essential amino acids in it, and we germinate it. The protein now breaks down to the essential amino acids, making it very, very easy to digest. Okay? So now, what they've told you in the mainstream is that animal protein is different than plant-based protein, and better somehow. And the truth of the matter, quite simply, is that animal protein will never be user-friendly and digested by the human body. It takes 3 days to pass through. There's never complete digestion. And a lot of these distended stomachs you see in men and women in this country are long-term protein deficiencies. You would equate it with Somalian children, but you don't equate it with overweight, overeating Americans and Western Europeans. But that's what you're seeing there, long-term protein deficiencies. So we are really in an odd circumstance, not only physiologically with diseases, but now we're clear that almost 40% of greenhouse gases come because humans chose, in great part, to eat meat and dairy food. Now listen closely, this is fact. Only 17% of all greenhouse gases come from cars. So all of you with Priuses, I applaud you. You're making an attempt, but it's doing very little compared to giving up meat and dairy food. Because over double the amount of greenhouse gases would be stopped if we just stopped doing something as insane as considering eating meat and dairy. And my whole diet when I was growing up as an Irish Catholic on the East Coast in New York area was meat and dairy. And I liked meat and I liked dairy, loved meat and dairy the day I gave it up. And this is a big challenge for you. But my God, even if you don't love and like and respect yourself enough, at least try to save the earth for your children and grandchildren. So stop eating meat and dairy for that reason. But boy, the protein's far better. That's the difference. Far better in plants. And over here? Yes?
How's the long-term compliance once people are educated and get this and they go home? I mean, how is it?
You're asking about the compliance. Well, on my board of directors, I had Natalie Cabot-Nagel. And Natalie was married to the Cabots of Boston, wonderful lady. And she was a woman with her husband who was a professor at Harvard. They weren't the rich Cabots. That in the 1940s created the study of aging called gerontology. And she worked with us and was sitting on the board and brilliant. And she said to me, I think 3 weeks after I became director in 1980, can you please tell me the statistics on adherence to this program? And I went, I said, I can't even find the names and addresses of people who have been here. So we ran all over the Institute and looked at every drawer and everything and every box we could and collected, I had 8,000 names or something finally. And we sent out a mailing, and God knows how many were alive still. But we did our first study then. And it was really surprising to me, because I was braced to say 98% of the people no longer do any of this, because of the way we were approaching people in those days. It was almost like the Nazi approach to healing. Either you do this, or you drop dead, and you die, and that's it. And fight. And Anne was wonderful. She was an Eastern European, and she had saved her life. She healed herself of colon cancer. So as Eastern Europeans do, she was very forceful in the way she approached it. But we were surprised. 46% of the people had dramatically changed, stayed vegan, and 22% of them primarily are all raw food. Only less than 10% fallen off, and now they were juicing hot dogs rather than wheatgrass. And the rest were in between, eating a little meat or eating a little bit. But we were surprised. But then when we thought about it, remember, my early days at Hippocrates, practically every single person that came were given up to die. The only one who would ever come to Hippocrates in those days, in the 70s, or 5% hippies, and everyone else were, doctors said, okay, you're going to die tomorrow. Okay, I'll finally go to Hippocrates and take responsibility. So, and I see more of that now because of the availability. When I first did this, to find organic food in the winter in the north was impossible. You get carrot and apple if you were really in an enlightened community. That was it. And today, this is everywhere. I stop at supermarkets and buy organic food. I hadn't been in the supermarket other than getting water for years. Last 10 years, I stop in supermarkets and get organic food. So this has changed. And so I think the adherence is going up. The education is larger. People are learning things. People are finally realizing the credibility of everything we've ever been taught is gone. And so we've got to either do it ourselves or it's not going to work. Our life isn't going to work. And so for that reason, the adherence is high. What people get when they're at Hippocrates is education, by the way. What you're paying us for is education. And we have an extraordinary educational process. If you walk out of there and don't get what we say, you'd be the first person ever. And we drive it down your throat and say it every way we possibly can so you get it. And then for the rest of your life for free, we counsel you. So we keep our eye on you. And if you get really bad, you get a nasty call from us. What the hell happened to your blood test? Okay, we'll start in the back again on, yes?
Hi, a couple of things. One is you said what you said about blenders. What about the vitamins? My second question is about, you said what you said about frequency. Well, frequency is important. What do you think of the real machine? And also, and the second part of that is, do you think the real machine could cure hypothyroidism?
Okay. I hope I remember all of this. Okay. Number one, you said Vitamix. Number two, you said.
And the second one is, since you believe in the frequency,
do I like the frequency machine? Number three, Rife machine.
can the real machine cure hypothyroidism? Or do you have ideas
Okay.
about that?
Vitamix is a blender, only it's a very, 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 very fast blender, so it kills approximately 92% of the nutrients. So it's the best of all the killers. A $29 blender would be at the 85% level. Okay. Number two, there is a machine that pretty much is called a frequency machine that does have enough validity to it that I've seen people gain some benefit from it. I can't say I'm an expert on it, and I can't speak with any authority on the machine at all. Hippocrates, although we have $1 million worth of electromagnetic equipment, we do not have Rife machines. And here's why. Dr. Rife's genius was a microscope, not a machine. Dr. Rife would literally sit a day or two without eating or drinking, they tell me, and look through his microscope until he found the electronic frequency that matched the frequency of the disease, the virus, the bacteria, until that individual, in that particular case, it worked. Now, magically, somehow, well after Dr. Rife's death, somebody said, I'm sure a good salesperson, oh, Dr. Rife magically left behind a list of frequencies for breast cancer or for viral diseases. He didn't do that, love. His genius was individualizing things. Now, the good thing with the Rife machine is that if you're really, really, really lucky, the frequency of that machine may match at some level, or in great part, the frequency of your disorder, and it won't hurt you. But why we don't use it is that it's not a definitive science. It doesn't have any real long-term research that has impressed me at all. And everyone that I know that bought the machine ends up, if they think that's healing them, not getting well, and giving the machine to somebody else either after they died or something else. So you've got to remember there are some very valid electromagnetic machines that really work with major, major, major hospital research that has been done on thousands of people with them. Rife doesn't fit into that category. Anyone over here? Yes. Okay, she's asking about fasting. Now, number one, fasting can or may not be good for everyone. Every fasting clinic, and they don't admit this, generally carry people out the back door to the hospital or worse every year. Because if you take the average Western person who's been eating a bad diet and pull the plug out of their ventricles and their organs and pour all that saturated animal fat into their body and chemicals, cardiovascular arrest is common, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I've seen this enough to know what I'm saying is true. So you don't do that with everyone. Hippocrates, we believe that if you're eating a proper diet and fasting 1 day a week, if you're not emaciated or having an organ problem or having an emotional disorder, those people we don't fast 1 day a week, it's good. That means 52 days a year you stop eating. Now, why would that be good? Let's go back to human history. We were nomadic people for almost the entire time we've been on this earth. We never ate constantly. That's why our bodies in science are telling us now, if you eat less of high-quality food, you live longer. You have less disease. Because we may have walked for 2 days and then eaten, and then walked for 2 days and then eaten. And that's how the human body was built, and the anatomy works of the body. We've been taught, since we were young, and our poor mothers didn't know any better, feed him, feed him, feed him. He's going to starve. She's going to starve. Immediately feed them. And what did they feed us? It's ungodly stuff that should never have been consumed by anyone. Now, what it sounds like in this particular case, where somebody went on a fast, and I really hope it wasn't a water fast. Okay, well, I'll differentiate that. I was a big believer in water fast. I had done 40-day water fast, 52-day water fast, and I had the honor to direct the original Living Food Center in 1976. The original Living Food Center, and where those words came from, was a medical doctor called Dr. Christine Nolfi, who was from Denmark. And so I lived in Denmark for a year, about 20 minutes outside of Copenhagen. I was just there lecturing 4 weeks ago, and literally was putting healthy people, because who in Scandinavia came to health centers were healthy people. Totally unlike 1976 at Hippocrates, I'm going to die is who came to Hippocrates. So I'm putting them on water fast, and I can't say they're detoxing. They're laying on the couch with their eyeballs going in 3 directions with their tongue hanging out. And so I went down to the library, and I discovered something that I periodically check still, that the vast majority of us in the West are malnourished in some way. I started my lecture with that. You don't take away nourishment from a person that's already malnourished. You don't take away protein from a person who has 60% of you have a blood sugar problem, 60, 70% of you are dehydrated. You don't take that away because you can throw a major imbalance out. It sounds to me, even on a juice fast, that what happened is the kidneys didn't work. So if I had a blood test in front of me and looked at the creatine, and looked at the bun, and looked at the ratio between creatine and bun, I'll bet anything I would see a kidney thing happening with you. So you've got to look at that. It's serious, and don't just let that go. And if you have people who ate major high-protein diets in the past, no wonder their kidneys are bad. Well, I mean, there's a lot you can do, but this isn't a pop culture thing I can say to you. If I had a blood test in front of me, I would certainly, if it looked bad, tell you to get a scan of the kidney. Let's see if there's a growth, a tumor, the size of the thing. We've got to look at what it is. We don't just say, oh, go on a fast or stand on your head or drink urine. We've got to know what the hell it is. And in some cases, I'm going to tell you to do the opposite of what I tell everyone else to do. I wouldn't be giving you a lot of potassium, and most jutsus have a lot of potassium in them. And there's certain things, that's the last thing I would do for you, by the way. But it may not be a kidney disorder. You may have some odd thing happening that's not. So, by the way, I'd be more than happy if you sent me that blood test and waited 2 months because I'm always somewhere. I'll write you a letter and tell you, love. Yeah, rather than mysticizing on it. Yes?
What kinds of tests do you recommend? Blood tests, saliva, urine?
Well, it depends upon the person and the case when it comes to testing. When people come to Hippocrates, they first arrive, we do 3 forms of test or research. A medical blood test, which is called a chemistry 24, and a CBC. That's a very good, solid blood test. It shows us mostly what we want. Now, if somebody's having a thyroid problem, we may add that on. If somebody's having an immunological problem, we may add that on, a deeper one, but that's down the middle. We also do a microscopic testing, and we also do undermed testing. And undermed is a state-of-the-art in modern medicine. It picks up biofrequencies of organ functions and neurological systems. So it's a state-of-the-art. And so we're looking at the biofrequency, we're looking at the living cell, what's happening now, and chronologically, historically, what happened. We're looking at the medical blood test. And putting 3 of those together, we don't get 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. We probably get 1,000 times more information than you could individually with those together. At the end, 2 of those blood tests are done, and then depending upon who you are and what the concern is, when you go back to any part of the world, we're going to tell you to send medical blood tests back, maybe deeper, maybe less, and scans or whatever else we need. And I'm the guy who does most of that, and I love it because it's like putting puzzles together, and it's wonderful. I have Mary who came to us in 35 years ago, and Mary was told she had brain cancer, like the wonderful lady you saw who healed brain cancer. By the way, they put her on the board of the alternative section of NIH. She's the first case in recorded history of somebody that healed that cancer of the brain. And Mary's pile, 35 years, is like this. And I had Mary who came to us with weeks to live, and here Mary is 35 years later, is healthier than I am. And we see why that happened. Now, grant you, I have a lot of information we have never processed, because it takes somebody other than me, a statistician who's got research credentials and understands how to do this well, and it takes a lot of money to do this. But all of that is available, and we are looking for that. We're doing little pop things like with the NIH now. But the reality is we're looking for some major university. One of the reasons, by the way, I had a meeting with Oregon State University is for the potentiality for us to start to do some work with them. And then somebody being funded and say, okay, we'll take decades of Hippocrates research rather than inventing the wheel and seeing why Mary and John and Harry got well from whatever it may have been. Yes?
I'm a
Right.
So you're telling us it's kind of a trick, and that's kind of scary because of the amount of exercise that I'm doing. So I'm wondering if you have any...
Well, in my book, she's talking about caloric intake and exceptional high amounts of exercise. And there are cases, obviously, with exceptional exercise. I'm going to tell you to eat more than a person who is the average person sitting behind a desk all day long or cleaning a house or whatever else we're doing. But it will never be nearly what they're telling you to take, I can tell you that, even when I'm training with Olympic athletes. And one of the films I'm going to show you tomorrow has an Olympic athlete that won a gold medal. And what I consider one of the most important for strength, where he goes out on a wind sail thing. Have you ever tried to do one of those with your arms? I thought I was strong till I did that. And I felt like Mr. Wimp after that. I jumped off and said, oh, my God. And he won a gold medal in that. Beat everyone in the world. But the reality is, it's the quality of food and the type of food and the processing of molecular levels of the food. So sprouted grains and sprouted beans that we make into preparations that may not be quite as high calorically, but sustain for 2.5 hours energy loads. My book, Life Force, speaks about that. Calories are a dead issue. That what we really have to do is talk about energetics of food. Now, before we leave, we have to leave now. We're going to say a little prayer together. I hope you go over and get involved with both the auction and the wonderful cake and pie session they have here, because this is one of the highlights. And tonight you have two wonderful speakers that are going to be here, and I just can't tell you to say to Dan and Sherry how much you honor and love them. This takes a lot of work, and believe me, there's no money in this for them. So go and give them love all the time. Now let's close our eyes, take a deep breath, and convert you to the Sprout religion now. Take a breath. He's worried. Give these people the strength to live complete truth, never to waver, never to question their own ambitions, but to purely move forward with passion always. Amen. Thanks for coming. God bless. See you tomorrow.